to another episode of Jeeva's Report,
your weekly update on China's business and economy. In this episode, we'll be looking at the influence of government policy on corporate social responsibility in China's production industry. Before we start, what is corporate social responsibility? The goal of CSR is for companies to embrace the responsibility as well as to promote positive action in terms of consumers, to the employees, the environment, and all other members of the public sphere. For this presentation, we will focus on CSR in terms of a company's responsibility to their employees. This includes the company's responsibility for the workers' well-being, for the workers' rights, for their training and education. We first look at firms serving the domestic market. As China slowly moves to become the world's largest domestic economy, increases in economic ability as well as customer base should mean that CSR for these companies should be on the rise. However, this is not true, and as a matter of fact, many of these businesses hardly do any CSR. This occurs for many reasons. Firstly, China is a very special business practice. Instead of businesses regulated by laws and reasoning, business transactions in China are based off informal and social relationships. This is known as guanxi. Sinopec, a state-owned company, broke its own moral and legal code of business when one of its managers spent 1.6 million yuan of corporate money buying wines. Because of guanxi, he now only serves probation instead of imprisonment. So you see, in China, with guanxi, anything is possible. So, even with strong regulations in place, with social relationships with the government, companies can bypass laws. Secondly, previous government arrangements also allow companies to bypass laws. Many years ago, China introduced special economic zones in major provinces to boost the Chinese economy. In these zones, taxes and other costs of doing businesses are much lower. Currently in Shanghai, companies are obliged to pay over 20% of employee salaries to pension funds. In Shenzhen, they only have to do a measly 12%. This means depending on where you're working in China, CSR will vary. Small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs, are another large part of China's production industry. These firms work on a contract-to-contract basis and also have low profit margins. Since profit margins are small, it is hard to expect these firms to do a lot of CSR because money-making is still its primary focus. Surprisingly though, CSR is quite high for these companies, mainly because they aim to attract both international and domestic partners. Despite the fact that their business scales are small, these companies are affected by overseas compliance law. Compliance laws in Europe and America means that importers have to follow safety and health regulations. For example, Alibaba, a buyer-to-buyer platform which connects world customers with Chinese SME producers, has joined with Intertech, an audit company, to ensure that producers have such compliance audits.
So how do government policy affects firms serving the overseas market? These companies are most of the time heavily affected by government regulation and do most of the CSR in China. Let's have a look at Foxconn in particular. Foxconn, whose main factories are in China, serves as a supplier for many foreign companies. It is the world's largest maker of electronic components and supplies for famous brands such as Apple and Microsoft. Since it is targeted at the overseas market, it is heavily affected by compliance law. China's improved labor law, which was established in 2008, also made a difference to CSR. The legislation limits overtime, sets minimum wages, and requires additional pay for early worker layoffs. Firms serving overseas markets have to follow Chinese labor law and observe legal requirements from overseas countries. So, Overseas requirements, such as the use of fixed contracts and prohibition of using child labor, help to improve CSR. These laws put pressure on companies to ensure their responsibility to their employees. For instance, as a matter of fact, straight after China labor law passed, Carrefour China has asked over 40,000 of its Chinese employees to re-sign a 2-year labor contract to ensure that the company follows the new labor law to protect workers. So, the example of Foxconn and Carrefour showed us that the government regulation in fact made a difference to CSR in China. But how effective is CSR in China really? Even for the firms serving overseas markets, whether they have carried out strong CSR is still disputable. Recently, Apple, for example, acknowledged that 130 of its workers at a factory had been seriously injured by a toxic chemical. And this despite of the statements of how Apple is committed to drive the high standard of social responsibility throughout their supply chain. And then, despite the high ranking of Foxconn in the Oxfam Index, the big Foxconn scandal in 2008, where few employees killed themselves, leads us to question about the effectiveness of strong CSR. So, we interviewed Foxconn CSO for more details and hopefully we are able to understand more about CSR in China. Welcome, Mr. Go. Thank you for joining our mission. Please take a seat.
Thank you.
So, first question. What is your opinion on the recent scandals in Foxconn?
It's a difficult question. And, the workers' deaths definitely shocked me a bit, even myself. And all I can say is we were definitely looking for a solution to that problem. But more than that, Foxconn is not a sweatshop. If you walk into a factory, oh my gosh, it's a factory. But we have, it's pretty nice there. We've got swimming pools, we've got movie theaters, we've got everything. So we're still thinking into reasons why the workers would have suicided.
We had an interview with one of your workers who said life in the factory was very tough and that they get yelled at them all the time. So what is your opinion and what would you reply to that worker to make him feel better?
With regards to your comment, I'd like to say I'm very surprised. Many of our managers are well trained, and our executives are also well trained as well to deal with these workers. So maybe this might be a case of the media trying to create an image which isn't really what's happening. And I have to agree though that working at Foxconn probably isn't the most interesting thing that a worker can do. But I can assure you that we're trying our best to ensure that these workers get a healthy lifestyle and get the support that they need outside of their work.
Through our research, Foxconn ranks very high for CSR for its employees. Why do you think other firms serving the domestic market don't rank so high? Why?
Well, since overseas compliance regulations are enforced, and European customers tend to care a lot more about the product origin and also the manufacturing process. Let's take an example of fair trade. It means that companies like my own have to do a lot of CSR. Compared to Western cultures, CSR is also a very new thing to China. I think China's main goal right now, and for the past 20 years, is probably to improve its economy. So CSR probably isn't on the top priority list. But it's still good. It's great. It's great to see that CSR is making its way into China, and it takes time. It takes time for the government to make these policies, to monitor the progress, and to educate employees and also the employers about CSR.
As a result, what do you think is the future of CSR in China, considering the manufacturing industry? And what's the future of Foxconn?
As Foxconn, I'd just like to say first, we do value the importance of CSR, and definitely will try our best to protect the well-beings of our employees. We will definitely investigate even further for Foxconn scandals and do our best to ensure that our workers get the best treatment that they deserve. Regarding the future of CSR in China, well, China's economy right now is moving from a manufacturing-based economy more towards a consumer-based one, where China is going to become the largest domestic market. And this means a movement from manufacturing to services. And that as a result means that it's going to be very hard for us to attract workers because there are going to be better opportunities and better working environments elsewhere. So regardless of government policies, regardless of the press, regardless of what consumers want, us as factories have to enhance our CSR if we're going to lure in workers.
So, has government policy really changed CSR in China? Our answer is yes.
With increase in Chinese regulations and overseas regulations to safeguard workers, changes from production basis to consumer market, companies have to face their responsibility to their employees in order to retain workers and to be competent in the global market.
Join us next time on Jibo's Report when we look deeper into America's financial crisis.